All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another future focused weekly update where I'm hopefully keeping you at 10 steps ahead of what's happening at this intersection of business tech and human experience. This is probably going to be, I'm going to take a break next week from this, so I won't release a weekly update next week. I'm going to be off for the 4th and just take a little bit of time. So I don't think I'll have a double one when I come back. But anyway, that's what's going on here. So if you don't see one next week, that's why. I hope it's been a great week. Thanks to everybody who tunes in and sends stuff along. And by all means, if you would, do me a favor and send this to somebody who would find value in it and give it a rating or review if you found it helpful. But with that, I want to jump into, I've got potentially 6. We'll see how we do on time. It might be more like my usual 5 that I get through today that I want to talk through. So the first one is, if you listened, I don't know, it was a few weeks back, I had talked about Dell had made a pretty significant announcement where they had told their employees, look, if you want to be remote, 100% remote, that's fine. However, you will not be eligible for a promotion. You won't be eligible for a job change. You won't be, it was basically a threat, a bit of a ultimatum. Ultimatum is probably a better term for it. So this happened a while back, which was really disappointing coming from Dell, who just a few years ago had said any company that needs to force its employees to come in, should ask them, look in the mirror, something like that. But anyway, so Dell had significantly made this change. But what was really interesting, and the reason that I brought this up this week, was Dell's employees responded. That is for sure. And Dell's employees responded in droves by saying, fine, that's what you want to do. We'll take your offer. And over 50%, it was like 55% or something, said, we'll take the deal. And they signed the paperwork and said, great. Okay, well, we're staying here. We're forever remote. You can't now say anything else about it. And now you can't promote us or anything like that. So I think there's a couple things that when I saw this story, and you may hear me say this and have your ideas of how you think I'm responding to it. I actually have mixed feelings about the whole situation, because I actually think the whole thing is just a tragedy, and you'll see why as I get into it. But on one hand, I say go for it, employees. I think good for them. And I think it speaks to the fact that any company who does not think flexibility, now granted, this one in particular was remote work, but it's not necessarily remote work. It really is flexibility, because if you look into Dell's policy and what they were doing it wasn't just, hey, remote or a nice flexible hybrid option or anything like that. It really was, you either sign this ultimatum deal, or we literally are going to be checking in on you and making sure you're showing up to the office X number of hours a week. So there wasn't really any middle ground. It was either kind of draconian oversight or total remote flexibility, which I think is unfortunate, because it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to go to this one extreme or the other option. So I think that, to me, just from the beginning and the onset, to me, was just the sad part about the whole ultimatum from Dell. Not only was it the fact that they were really a pinnacle and known for their focus on flexibility, and the fact they fell so far from that, but then the fact it's like, not only did you fall from that, but you bought into this whole false narrative that it's like you have to be this or you have to be this. And so for companies listening to this, or if you're an employer or a manager or things, if you're still buying into this idea that flexibility means complete lack of control or oversight and no guardrails whatsoever, you just let your people run free, or you have to have this just lockdown over managed way of running, there is so much more room in the middle. And I don't know what I can do more to try and help companies and leaders understand that it's not this or that. So to me, that was unfortunate. But when I looked at the employees responding, I'm like, well, clearly companies who don't take this seriously better take note, because let me tell you, from an HR standpoint, over half of your employees going, fine, we take this deal, and now being locked into this thing where you can't mobilize or promote or whatever, because the second you do, somebody's going to sue, and it's going to make an absolute mess for you. So I actually have a lot of, because I'm confident, having been in enough companies, that this was one of those things where it was rushed to market as kind of a, hey, they're never going to push back on this. And I won't mention the company I was at when this happened once, but this happened at a company I was at once, where they said, we need everybody to move to this location. And so we're going to quick throw together a deal and be like, you got to move to this location, or we're going to, terminate you. And similar to the Dell thing, just again, from a leadership standpoint, this is not a good move to pull on your employees, to put them in an ultimatum, gun to your head, do this or else move. I've seen this backfire so many times. So that's what happened here with Dell, is they gave them an ultimatum, held a gun to their head and said, you're going to be in an office 3 days a week under all these rules, or fine, you can have what you want because we need you here, but then you're never going to get promoted or mobilized. And the employees said, okay, we'll play your game. Spin the chamber. I'll play. And again, I saw this firsthand with another company where they were in a rush. They thought they needed to do something. And so they pushed it through without thinking the long-term implications. And in the company I was at, I remember they said, you need to move here. And if you don't move here by this date, we're going to terminate your employment. And in that instance, over 90% of the people said, we'll take your deal. And the company ended up in this position where they went, wait, what? We weren't thinking you were actually going to take us up on this. And that company I was at, I remember it was a mad scramble because they lost their entire marketing team. I mean, the whole marketing team just vaporized overnight because it was like, well, oh, you mean you're going to take the work through date and the package? And over 9 out of 10 said, yes, we will. Thank you. And as any company or any leader knows, once a person's decided to move on, they may be there, but lights are on and nobody's home. And I think Dell's going to be in a real situation now where they're going to go, well, now what do we do? We've got all these employees who are remote that unless we just come back and go, we're sorry, and completely eat crow on this, which I have yet to see companies do a good job of that, they're stuck. They're stuck with this. And then when it comes to, well, what happens if we need some leader on a team quits and the best person for the job is the remote employer, the whole team's remote, and now they don't have a leader and we can't even promote somebody because it's going to be really messy for them. And so I hope this is a warning to organizations, a very public warning. This is not a good position to put your employees in. And you may think, oh, they'll never. I have seen countless times companies get completely blown back on this. Now, the part, though, that I would say to employees that you need to be really careful of, because stories like this, and I know I probably have plenty of people who are on the employee side of this who might be going, yeah, go get them, Dell. I also don't share that sentiment, in that I think employees, when the power pendulum swings on the employee side, you can get the rah-rah, and employees can suddenly get an over exaggerated sense of their worth and their value. And you can start to get cocky and think, hey, now we're untouchable. They're never going to do anything to me. And I really hope, again, for the Dell employees, I hope they take this with humility and, don't start kind of strutting their stuff, because what can happen is, and I've seen this too, is the company will hit back in ways they weren't expecting. And so employees can be like, yeah, see, we're untouchable. They need us so much. And then all of a sudden you'll see Dell come in and go, well, you know what? We just laid you all off and we replaced you with AI agents. And this kind of stuff has happened. I've watched it play out. It does not end well. And it really goes back to people just being humble and coming to the table and going, hey, look, we made a mistake. Like, let's figure this out like adults and figure out what we do to move this forward. Because it's not going to be pretty, I don't think. A company where half of your employees you cannot promote or mobilize, that is a nightmare for stuff. that is a nightmare for a company, and they are going to have to do something. And that's my concern with this situation, is what are they going to do in response to this? Because you can't run a company where you literally cannot move employees or promote them legally without just massive lawsuits. And so how Dell's going to respond and what they're going to do, it's going to be very interesting. And so if anything, if you're a Dell employee, keep your head down, be a good worker, be a great employee, show them that, hey, us doing this wasn't a revolt against you. It was because we know how to get our job done and we're committed to you as the organization, and make space for them to come back and go, you know what, maybe we overreacted and let's solve this. And I really hope it comes to a peaceable end, because it could also go really sideways. And so if you're a company, don't ever put yourself in this position. But if you're an employee on this, don't overassume your value either, because a lot of the work that many people do can be replaced and isn't as critical as we'd like to think. And the company will move forward. And I can say firsthand, so a story I'll share with this, where I learned my lesson the hard way once, in that I was in a position, I was doing really good work. I let it get to my head. I thought I was untouchable, and I started behaving in ways that, I'm not proud of looking back on it. And it's not like I did anything unethical, but I got cocky. And at one point the company said, yeah, you're not really as critical as you think you are. And it ended in me leaving the company. And I remember going, well, you're never gonna be able to operate without me. And they did just fine when I left. And that was a big dose of humble pie. Now, granted, I ended up humbling myself and going back and acknowledging I made a mistake and saying, you know what, I totally overestimated my value and whatever. And I had a conversation with the team and they brought me back, but I was a different person after that. And so regardless of what side you sit on these kinds of things, a heavy dose of humility and a willingness just to work together will serve everybody well. So I'm interested to see how this continues to play out. But it was an interesting news article that I went, wow, all right, we'll see where this goes. So transitioning to number 2, if you've been following kind of the large language model space or anything like that, Anthropic debuted their big old Claude 3.5 Sonnet model, and it's taken the industry a bit by storm. Now, if you're the average generative AI user or you're a casual user of AI models, things like that, you've heard me talk about in the past before. I don't think you're going to use this and just have your mind blown and go, oh my gosh, everything I was doing now, I need to shift the bandwagon and be a Claude 3.5 Sonnet user. There's still limitations to it. Again, we're in this age of the early computer, early mobile phone days where the new generations come out and they're wildly different on the benchmarks and they're going to crush the competition. And then the competition comes back. GPT released 4.0 and it was way better than the other models. Then Anthropic hits back. And if you're an end user, I will be the first to say, don't get too sucked up in the hype of these things. You will find yourself fatigued, constantly changing models, constantly trying to reuse the user interface, trying to figure out, well, now do I do this? Do I switch my subscription? Do I do all this? I took some time to dig into it and use it myself, play around with it. Here's what I would say. If you have a model that you're super comfortable with and things like this, and you use it as more of a casual user, don't change your subscription. Honestly, I would encourage people, if you do like playing around with these different models, look into something like Poe. If you're not familiar, and they're not sponsored, I'm not, trying to get anybody to go sign up for Poe, but Poe is basically like a third-party tool that actually has access to all the different models. And I've found that to be super helpful in that if you're like, well, I want to toy around with different models and use different models for different things and see which one works best, Poe, I personally have found to be the most effective tool. If you know of other ones, please let me know in the comments. Like I said, I'm not telling people to go get Poe. That just happens to be the one I'm familiar with. So if you like toying around with different models and finding the ones that achieve the better result for what you're trying to do for a specific purpose, and you don't want to be in the cord cutter phase of generative AI where you've got 32 different subscriptions to different AI models, something like that may be helpful for you. My personal experience with the new Claude 3.5 model was I will say, I do like the way it writes better than some of the other models. Now, granted, I've trained my GPT-4o model to think and behave more like I do. It's still not great, and I still have to do a lot of work with it, but I had Claude do some writing for me just to test it out, and I went, nah, it's not really how I would write, and I found myself doing a ton of heavy editing and stuff on that, but it can be great for getting there. Now, if you're doing a ton of writing, and that is primarily what you do with ChatGPT or your large language model of choice, I actually think it might be worth kicking the tires on. I will tell you, if you're using the free model, you're going to burn through your tokens super fast. So don't think you're going to accomplish much with the free version. So if you do find toying around with it, you really like it, you're probably going to end up having to pay for it, or go get Poe, and then you can use it as much as you need it for and get access to the premium version of it. But again, it's made a lot of noise. It is definitely, edged above the benchmarks. If you look at the actual benchmarks of it, I didn't screenshot any of the benchmark stuff because some folks really find that valuable, others don't. It wasn't super notable. Like, there wasn't anything where you just went, oh my gosh, it's doubled in its capability in this. I will say it speaks and behaves more advanced than some of the other models. GPT-4o, I think, is doing pretty solid. So again, if you're the casual user, I would not recommend running out. But if you like playing around with them, go play with Claude 3.5. I think we're gonna continue to see these models edge one up, keep one upping each other. But my honest advice to people is just be really careful, because you can burn yourself out real quick, and you can end up spending a lot of money on these tools and may not get a lot of value. And it's very easy to do, where you go, well, I have these 8 subscriptions. We saw it with the cord cutter thing. That's actually my biggest concern with these AI models constantly changing, and then all the hype around this stuff there's a lot of pressure to just be using the latest and greatest of all these different models competing with each other. And we're in this stage where everybody's still getting familiar with it. So just be really careful. And that's where, if anything, maybe look for one of those third-party ones that can give you access to toy around with it if you really do use it heavily. But again, nothing, honestly, I didn't think it was anything mind-blowing. I didn't have my mind blown by Anthropic. It's cool. It's great. Super helpful. It's not going to change your life. All right. Moving on to number 3. There's a lot of talk about, I came across this article this week. There's a lot of talk going on in the work industry. And I understand. You hear the headlines of either AI is coming for everybody's job, or you hear the headlines that no, AI is not going to do anybody's job. It's just going to augment and all this other stuff. And I tend to be more in that camp where I don't necessarily see it coming for people's jobs, at least not if you really care about how well those jobs are done. But stories like this come out and you go, this reinforces, kind of going back to my earlier point with the Dell employees, to don't get cocky. So the person came out, they of course kept things anonymous. They didn't share what company they're at, but they told their story. And it honestly is a tragic story. They worked for a company. They were the head of writing. They had a large 60-person employee team that was responsible for writing all of the media and the articles that this company put out. Now, because they were anonymous, I don't know what industry were they in, what were they trying to do, but they were clearly churning out a lot of content. And what happened is the Gen AI thing started coming in, and this was the leader of this big group. And at first it started with, hey, bring Gen AI in to help augment your team and their stuff and help them produce this and set up your workflows to be optimized to use AI and all of this stuff. And then pretty soon he had to cut big parts of his team, and it just kept happening to the point where he was the only one left basically just pushing buttons on these automated AI workflows. And then he got let go on this. And so to people out there who may be kind of clinging tightly to this idea that no, AI will never replace my job, or I have no reason to fear any of this, you should be rightfully concerned, especially your biggest threat is complacency. And so if you're just kind of sitting on your laurels going, I don't need to worry about this AI thing because what I do is so valuable and I'm so valuable to this company, they're never going to do it. And yeah, I'll use AI, but it's just going to augment me. You're at real risk. And this is an example of that. I've seen multiple other companies and have actually advised some companies who ultimately went against my advice and laid off a bunch of people and replaced them with AI agents. So the risk is real, and this is starting to happen more and more. And so I don't say that to freak people out, but more to put you on alert that the realistic version of, hey, here's your pink slip because we're replacing you with AI is we're there. We're there. The models are advanced enough. The focus on AI agents and automated workflows is reaching a point in knowledge work where there are a lot of things that you don't need a person for, and that might be concerning. Now, the part that I will respond to this, because like I said, I don't think people should walk away with this with fear, but more a greater alertness and a greater desire to say, hey, I don't want that to happen to me. So what can I do about it? So first of all, when I actually dug into the story a little bit more, the writing should have been on the wall on this one from the beginning. So as you looked into the kind of articles and really the workflow of what this writing team was doing, their job was to scrape the internet for, the most viral content, things like that, then to repackage it under their company's brand and then put it out as quickly and as, in as much volume as humanly possible. So when you start to think about it that way, you start going, well, that doesn't necessarily sound like value add work. That sounds like robotic mechanical work. Red flag right there. So for an employee or a leader, because here this leader was the one who got involved in this from the beginning. As a leader, he should have seen this right away and gone, you know what? I actually don't know that the work that we're doing is actually adding a lot of value. So if you're a leader, you should be looking at where these things start to come in and go, what else could we be doing? Yeah, maybe that part of the work needs to still happen, but what is the other part of the work that we need to do? And this is one of the risks that I see all the time, where people just keep trying to do more and faster and not also looking at where can we be adding more value and doing more meaningful work. They just get the blinders on, and it's like, how do we just keep doing the work we're doing, but do it faster and create more of whatever it is? And that's exactly what happened, where when I actually read through the story, I'm like, dude, this had red flags all over it from the gate, because the work itself was questionable in terms of its value anyway. And then as AI started getting involved, all the people, all the teams, everything was just focused on do more of it faster. So if you're an employee and you find yourself in a situation where all of a sudden you're being asked to do more with AI, don't put those blinders on. And if you're a leader at being asked to take your organization with AI and start moving things forward, don't focus all your attention on just doing more faster, because that is putting you at a high risk. Because watching this thing play out, I'm like, yeah, you could have seen this coming miles away. You had these AI models come in, instead of starting to look for where you could be adding more value, where you could have been spending more time consulting with your business partners, deeply understanding, really layering this, you just got on the hamster wheel of doing this. And naturally, if you let that happen, pretty soon your company is just going to go, I mean, aren't we just producing more of this stuff that isn't necessarily adding more value? And because you can get sucked into this cycle where AI is just having you do more faster, your head is so far down, you're not looking up going, hey, like, how am I maintaining relationships? How am I making sure that I'm staying connected to other parts of the business? And you go into your isolation chamber where you're just churning work out. Pretty soon, your stakeholders, the other people making decisions about where should we invest, who are the people we want to keep around, pretty soon they don't really even remember who you are or what you do. They just see the output and they know that AI is doing a lot of it. And pretty soon the questions start happening of, couldn't AI just do this? And the answer to it is, well, yeah, it could. And so I absolutely think it's tragic for this leader and the 60 people underneath them. But I think to anybody who watches and listens this, who doesn't want this same cycle to repeat for them, there are some steps that you could be taking to prevent this from happening. Because I could absolutely see a world where that company still kept those 60 employees and they're just doing wildly different things alongside this other stuff. But they got sucked into the trap of, hey, here's what we do today. Now we have AI. Let's just do more of it and let's do it faster. And we'll just keep running down that cycle. And that's how we're going to demonstrate value to the company. And sure enough, eventually the company went, we don't need you to do that. So leaders and employees, watch out for this stuff. Be objective and critically analyze, is the work I'm doing meaningful, value add work? And you're never going to get to 100% meaningful value add work. But is the vast majority of your work stuff that you think it's valuable because you do it, but would anybody else say the same thing? And if you don't know, go ask. Go talk to other people. Ask them the perception of your group. Sometimes these conversations are really hard to have. But honestly, go ask around. Find out if people value the work that you're doing, if they're getting benefit from it. What is your perception outside your org? Look for those truth tellers that'll tell you the truth about it. If you are, great, but chances are there's probably some opportunity there. Then as you start to augment the AI piece, don't get trapped in the hamster wheel of just doing more faster. Because the thing is, even if the work you're doing is valuable and meaningful, and you think, well, AI is just an augment to it, so I'll just be able to do this meaningful work more and faster. I'm watching these things advance. The things you think only you're capable of, it's not going to last that long. So you need to be a step ahead of it going, all right, this was meaningful, valuable work. It's now being augmented by AI. Now a good chunk of that meaningful, valuable work isn't really quite so meaningful, valuable because AI is able to do it better. What are the next things that I could be doing? And then the third piece I would just say is make sure, I tell people this all the time, make sure you're spending a decent chunk of your time at work building relationships, staying connected with people outside of your functional silo, doing things like that, socializing the value that your work is doing, and getting that objective feedback to where it's not so that you can pivot and adjust. Too often, and this isn't just an AI problem, this is what happens, and I've seen this happen being in leadership positions in big orgs for years. Functions get so used to just doing the work they're doing, they go heads down, they get siloed in that work. Pretty soon, everybody forgets what it is they really do. And then people start asking the questions when times get tough. Because when times are great, people aren't asking these questions. You'll deal with functions that you don't really know what they do and you don't really know who's over there or anything like that. But when uncertainty hits or finances get a little bit tighter, people get in a room and they start going, hey, we got to get to this. And oftentimes there's a number associated with that. And it turns into what are we going to cut out to get to that number? And whether you like it or not, people's go-to is usually the thing they don't understand or have a perception that it's not adding value, even if it is. And you don't want to be that. And that's not just a threat from AI, but AI is going to exacerbate and accelerate that threat like it does with anything. The threat existed before. It's just AI is going to accelerate how quickly that can happen. And so before, you might have been able to put your head down and just do your job and not really pay attention for years, maybe decades. I mean, I've been in companies where people started and retired and nobody really ever asked, like, so what is it you do here? AI is just going to accelerate that, and you're not going to be able to get away with it for long. So that's my warning to people, not again to freak them out, but really to have you think critically about this and take action. So hopefully that little segment will encourage you to go through those exercises and get started on it now, because I don't want to see anybody in the situation this leader and his 60 employees found themselves in, where they get completely blindsided by AI. All right. The next one that comes up is go back and watch some of my other ones. I've talked about my concerns about OpenAI and its decision to start exploring generative AI in adult media and for adult purposes, things like that. Well, somebody sent this to me and said it begins, and I came across this article that over in China now, the sex robot industry is now starting to, well, they're in the process of integrating generative AI models into their sex robots. And one point of clarity, because some people that I've talked to were like, oh my gosh, this is a fully brand new industry. This is coming out of left field. How do we get here so quick? This industry in and of itself isn't new. And, for those who maybe, don't follow some of the technology trends as closely, this isn't necessarily new, but this was the concern that I had with generative AI starting to get involved in this stuff. Is now these robots are going to have personalities and personas, and you're going to be able to develop relationships with them, which is going to make this kind of stuff become that much more addictive. It's going to have deeper claws that are going to sink into people, and it's just going to make it even harder. And this stuff is coming as soon as this summer. Now, I think for the vast majority of people, I'm not as concerned about the actual robots themselves. I think they're a threat. I think there's something we need to be mindful of. I still think where we are culturally, certain cultures that may be more socially acceptable, I still think we're a ways off from the actual physical robots being considered not taboo and a little strange. But I think we're going to get there. But I think what's concerning is the fact that if it starts going into these robots, it already means that the models are getting to a point where it's being trained on all this stuff. It knows how to engage in adult type conversations and stuff like that. And so what's going to happen is those kinds of things aren't only going to go into robots that look and, behave like people. They're going to go into apps on your phone and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that has me concerned about the fact that we're already here come this summer, is the fact that if you look into statistics on addiction rates to adult media, if you look at the damage it's doing psychologically, what it's doing to people, it's not good. And so the fact that this is just continuing to charge down a path is not a positive one. And again, it's not that the problem is unique to AI, and it's not AI's fault that this is happening. This is an existing problem we have in society that now AI is latching itself onto, and it's going to accelerate and exacerbate this. So if you haven't watched my other ones, go back and watch those. You'll hear me kind of plead my case of, look, if you have addiction or you wrestle or struggle with adult content, adult media, you have an addiction to that kind of a thing, get help. Get help and get free from this stuff, because it's going to get more addictive and your options are going to become more prominent, and it's just going to continue down this trajectory. And I just don't want to see anybody hurt by it. And people are going to get hurt. They already are getting hurt. Only more are going to get hurt. So anyway, that's another disappointing update from my perspective on where we are with the state of things. All right, something a little less heavy that I want to transition to is some of the advancements that are happening in the text to video, natural language text to video space. There's really two big ones that I've been following this week that have been kind of interesting. The two companies, and just so everybody knows, I'm not sponsored by stuff. I don't talk about companies because they ask me to or anything like that. It truly is, I come across things, I look into them, and then I talk about them. So I've got no skin in the game on these, But these are two companies that came across my desk that I went, oh, interesting to see how text to video is evolving and what it could mean, how it could be really helpful, and where it might be not so helpful. So the first one was a company called Luma Labs that this one is interesting in that Luma Labs is more like an OpenAI Sora or one of these other ones. I can't remember the other one that's really playing in the space. I know China has a really awesome model for this, but where it's actually generating from scratch high quality media based on what you said. So I want a video of someone walking down a set of railroad tracks in a sunset, whatever. And it creates a completely artificial video of what you just described. Now that's what Luma Labs does. Now what's different about Luma Labs compared to like Sora and some of these other ones is it's publicly available. So if you wanted to do this, you can go sign up. There's even a free option where you can test it out. And I did this last week. I spent some time playing around with it, and it was pretty interesting. Being able to just kind of say, hey, I want a video of this and having it created. Here's what I will tell you, because I've seen plenty of things coming out recently that's like, oh, the media industry's doomed. People are just going to be sending text prompts and full TV series are going to be created based on these. We are nowhere near this. Honestly, when I was playing around with some of this stuff, I was writing some pretty advanced prompts for this. And the things I got back were okay. It was kind of like going through stock photos or even using it for AI images where you'll ask it for something and it gives you something. You go, I mean, okay, it's all right. I wouldn't necessarily have, that isn't what I had in my head, but it's okay, close enough to what I need that I can use it. Wasn't perfect. Now, granted, Luma Labs is not as advanced as Sora or some of these more advanced ones, but it's showing how quickly this is picking up. I think one of the reasons it's a little bit concerning for me is that part of the reason that Sora and some of these other text to video models have been kind of protected to a small group of people is there's a lot of potential to create dangerous deep fakes with this stuff where you can literally manufacture a video of something that never happened that looks cinema quality that you would never know isn't real. And I will tell you right now, having played with Luma Labs, I'm not terribly concerned that somebody's going to say, hey, create a video of that. But it shows how quickly the models are advancing. And if you remember text to image, when they first came out, if you asked AI to generate you an image of things, you were kind of like, yeah, like, I don't know that I can really work with that unless it was really, really, really basic. Now you can go to GPT 4.0 and ask it to make you an image and give it for some pretty specific criteria. And if you watch my other videos, you can even be like, nah, edit that out and change this to that. And it's come a long way. And that's on the publicly available version. So Luma Labs, I think we're going to see that same progress with video. Now, like I said, is this going to be something where you could go, hey, make me a 40-minute video of a, I don't know, newscast on these things, and bam, it just creates it? I don't think we're anywhere near this. What it creates is these short little clips. But where I'm still concerned about this, and this is the part that I think we just need to be more and more conscious of as we think about the things we see, is as AI generated, and I'll make the parallel to AI generated images, the number of posts that I see that if you just read the post would be kind of emotionally neutral. You'd watch it and you'd go, you'd read it and you kind of go, eh. But then there's this really compelling, powerful visual that invokes an emotion in you that now is alongside that post, that the post doesn't misrepresent something, but the post plus the image conveys a very specific message that you could easily back up and go, I never said that. But the combination of the post with the image conveys that. And I've seen this with some of the conspiratorial stuff where the post is kind of neutered and neutral and sanitized, but then there's this really powerful visual image that shows kind of a, militaristic, or violent kind of image. And you go, well, okay, so that's what you're trying to convey with this. The subtle cues start coming through, and you can start to influence while still having kind of the, I didn't do that, I never said these kinds of things. And I think that's the concern I have about some of this text to video is, yeah, you may not have a straight up deep fake of somebody doing something they didn't do at this point, because those models are a little more protected. But I think of just being able to influence people with misleading information that creates an emotional response and things like this. We can already do that now with imagery. I'm concerned that video and the power of video is going to be able to do that more. We're now not just an image that really makes you go, ooh, but now you can create a video that now has this voiceover that portrays an image that is very neutral. You could claim it's neutral, but also the combination of the video and the text together now make it say a very different message than it may look like on the surface. And I think that's the concern I have about things like Luma Labs, is people who are engineering media for specific purposes. Could it be used for good? Yeah. Could it also be used for nefarious purposes? Yeah. So I think, again, my call out to people is just be so careful with the kind of stuff you're consuming and watch for this stuff. The number of times my wife has shown me stuff just to react to, where I see it and I go, yeah, the post, it's not that out there. The post plus the image, now it's really out there, and now it's very divisive, or it's sending a very clear message to try and influence a group of people. Watch for that stuff. Check your emotions. You'll see it happen. And I think we're going to see more of that as things like Luma Labs make it really easy for somebody to go, yeah, now I want to have this video kind of represent the post that I go with. So be careful, but go around and kick the tires on it, play around with it. It's kind of cool. It's fun seeing how it works. The other advancement in AI video that was pretty interesting, that's in a little bit of a different direction, is a company called InVideo AI. And what theirs is you can kind of say, I want this kind of video, and it's really more of a automating the workflow of video content creation. So essentially, as an example, you could walk through the workflow of this, and it'd probably be easier if I showed you, but I'm just going to talk you through it in words, where you said, maybe I want a YouTube explainer video. I want a 2 to 3 minute YouTube explainer video. And this is the topic that it's on. These are some of the key points that I want it to make. And I want to just generate this thing with kind of the easy button. What InVideo AI can do is you can train it on your voice, so it can have your voice doing it. You can give it kind of some basic prompts, and then it can create the script, narrate the script, and then find or create stock video or image footage that it then kind of like places along this. So it's basically like one of those videos you watch where, it's narrated and there's images or videos playing in the background, and they change based on what's being said, and you just kind of like watch it and listen to it. This goes back to what I'm saying with Luma Labs, where it's designed to invoke an emotional response in you, both through the words and the images that you're seeing. So what you're hearing and you're seeing at the same time. And what InVideo AI does is it automates this whole thing. So you can now shell out loads of YouTube explainer videos with the push of a button. The reason I think this could be helpful, I think we're going to see more and more automation of some of this stuff, which for anybody who's in the content creation space, this probably sounds like, oh my word, this is going to be amazing, because I spend a lot of my time doing this, where I have a script from somebody. I spend hours going back and forth getting it right. Then I got to try and get their voice to do it. Then after I get the whole thing, I got to go search iStock photo for stock things. And then I got to sit and try and map them up. And the workflow is completely contained in here. So you can do this really quick. There's a world where I can see this being a huge lift for people going, this is the work I already do, and it now helps me do it better and faster, which, if you've been listening so far, you know my warning that's coming with that. This is also good for people who may be new to the content creation space. And I I actually engaged in a social media dialogue with somebody before who kind of had taken a rap on people who were just creating AI generated content and putting it out there, going like, enough of this junk. Like, if you're going to be a content creator, be original. I understand where that comes from, but I'm also really empathetic to the fact that becoming a content creator can be very intimidating. Not only do you have to learn all the technical workflows and how does all this stuff work, but then you also got to start figuring out where your voice is and how do you create your voice and how do you do all this. So tools like this, I think, can be really helpful for somebody who's just getting started, going like, I'm trying to find my voice. Where it concerns me is where people end on this. And, now you've created a YouTube channel of explainer videos. You don't even know jack squat about any of your explainer videos because you just had AI generate stuff and you just pumped it out. That's something that I don't think we need more of. It's, again, the snake eating its own tail. We don't need more just mindless media out there that isn't really adding value to anything, and there's no distinct perspective on any of it. Which, granted, could you use InVideo AI and do all that still? Well, sure, because you could go through and edit and tweak and modify and actually put your thumbprint on it, and it could help you with that, which is awesome. Could you also just hit the easy button, ask it to make you a 4-minute video, put no thought into it, publish it to your YouTube, and probably get a bunch of clicks and views because it did a good job grabbing some emotionally compelling stuff and jamming it together with all the right SEO words that catches the algorithm? Yeah, you could. And I don't think we need more of that. But I think ultimately, going back to my warning from the early one, and this is where I'll close it out so I don't go too long, is these are the kind of tools, the InVideo AI one, to me, are the kind of tools that essentially have the potential to set a trap for people where it can look really great on the surface, just like that leader who had an employee team of 60, where it was like, hey, we got to create all this media. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could just automate and streamline all this stuff and never really think critically, never come up with new work and just do this. InVideo AI is that temptation to go, man, we need to generate more videos. We need to put more stuff out there. Let's just do this. You get too far embedded in this and you don't think about the higher order, more valuable work that you could be doing or focusing on those relationships. And pretty soon, someone somewhere is just going to go, why do we need a team of people doing this? Let's just have so-and-so do it because they know enough to write the prompt and pump the video out. We'll hire an intern for, dirt cheap or free and have them just post them to YouTube. They'll understand the workflows. We'll train somebody else to do this thing. So again, I think there's tremendous potential in this. It's crazy how far this thing has gone. I played around with InVideo AI. It's kind of like ChatGPT. You could go to ChatGPT and say, write an article for my Substack. And it could. And on the surface, it might look decent. And to somebody who maybe doesn't know anything about the space, they might read it and go, this is interesting. But to anybody who actually knows anything about it or is actually interested in going deeper, they'd read it and go, this is AI garbage. And I think the same is true with InVideo AI. Could you use it to make some really cool videos in a really quick automated way? Sure. It also could just create a bunch of crap that clutters up the internet. And I think the decision is really ours in how we use it. So those were the biggest updates I had before I wrap up this week and head out for the weekend. Long week off, and I hope you have a great one. And I hope this was helpful. I will be back. I'm a little bit scatterbrained today. So if this week's episode is your first one and you go, that felt a little all over, well, it's not normally quite as all over. At least I don't think it is, but you can tell me if otherwise. But yeah, those are the things that I had. Hope you have a great week, great weekend, and we will see you on the other side.